What's up, everybody? Welcome to podcast now. I'm Alex. In this video, I want to talk about a Dragon Age remaster, the newest talk on it. I actually watched this podcast not immediately when it came out, but pretty soon after, and I kind of saw, the news stories start to spin, from it. So we had a former Dragon Age director in Mark Dara. He's obviously been around. He's kind of got mixed opinions online. That interview with Mr. Maddie, that kind of got mixed opinions, and I think it probably stems from how he described trends and comparing the trends of Dragon Age to the trends of Thor. I wasn't a huge fan of that either, but I do think the guy's got a wealth of knowledge, and he seems like just a nice guy. And he talked about a lot of stuff, and obviously Dragon Age, getting the old games back was a big part of that podcast, and again, what they said started to become this bigger story. So I'll just mention this really fast, but also early in this video, a friend of my channel, Joe Mack, actually did a petition for the Dragon Age Legendary Edition. I'll link it below if you guys want to sign it, but if it gets enough people, you never know. So check it out if you guys want to. I signed it, and we'll see how far it can go. But that was a big topic, and basically what it just comes down to, a little similar to what we've heard before. In fact, that actually is kind of what makes it sad, right? Is that we have heard this before. We've heard that it is very difficult to do a Dragon Age remaster, mainly because of those engines, right? The fact that all three of them are on different engines. We heard this maybe a year or so ago. Now, the added stuff that I actually found really interesting was kind of that business side of things. So he said kind of two things with the business side I want to focus on. Number one, he talked about how EA doesn't like remasters, and he kind of goes in and out of saying things like they're full-on fact, and then also what his interpretation is, and he kind of goes back and forth, so you don't know for sure. I mean, he did say, I think, he said, well, EA is kind of said it out loud. I don't know if EA's ever legitimately said they don't like remasters, but is there evidence that EA doesn't like remasters? Well, number one, yeah, there kind of is. They don't do it all that often. When we got the Dead Space remake, right, which I thought was phenomenal, they pulled the franchise. I mean, what we kind of heard behind closed doors is that they actually had tried to pitch and do a Dead Space 2 remake, and then EA told them no, and they went kind of on Iron Man, right, which is what they're working on now. So we had that. You had the Mass Effect Legendary Edition, and that got off the ground. That it seems successful, but obviously not successful enough to get more. And that really leads to, I think, the most interesting part about all of this, right? Which is, okay, well, why? And a different reason why. So some of these companies kind of control their own finances. So like BioWare, they're given money, whether it's every year, every quarter, whatever it is. BioWare's got money, and I believe he said, they have pitched Dragon Age before. And the response basically is either no, or, okay, do it, but do it with the money you already have. So that felt, and the way he said it, felt very specific, and it's okay, this is actually what happened. I don't think this was his interpretation of these events. It sounds like at some point or multiple points they had pitched to do this Dragon Age thing. And I think he talked about even rewording them to make it a trilogy. So 1, 2, and Inquisition kind of is, right? But because it's not 1, 2, 3, it's not a perfect trilogy name. But he did say they tried to do that. So they tried to convince EA to make it like a Dragon Age trilogy, like the original trilogy, right? And put it out, do a remaster. And he did say remasters would be the way to go, right? It's not going to be a remake, probably, of any of these games. It would be a remaster, and you do all three of them, 1, 2, and Inquisition. But again, the response kind of is, okay, you can do it, but you have to do it with the money you already have. And the issue is BioWare is using that money to do what they're doing. Now, you could argue if they're using that money all that well. That's something he didn't really, touch upon, but you could argue, right? Are they using the money they get from EA wisely? You could argue, though, okay, well, what's a Dragon Age remaster really going to do? I mean, look, I want it. I think it would be largely beneficial. But what we normally know from these things, right, is low effort, small amount of time, right? You don't need a big team. You don't need a lot of time. You don't need all of this stuff. You put together a remaster collection, and then it kind of prints free money. And he did say that. He did. I think at one point he said, EA doesn't like free money, in this way. But the thing is, this isn't so easy, right? This is, again, specifically that first game would be a really tough time to remaster. So you have to do it in-house versus sending it elsewhere. I mean, look, I'm kind of recapping the interview. I mean, this is kind of what he said, right? Where I think Mass Effect Legendary Edition was largely done outside of BioWare, not in. Whereas Dragon Age would kind of have to be done inside of BioWare because of the code and the engines and all that jazz. And again, that's an issue. They'd have to hire people just to do the remasters, and then you'd have to keep them. You can't just fire them. You have to hire them. So are his reasons legit? Honestly, yes. And I think that besides just it's hard and the engine is difficult, right? Or it's like 3 different engines. Besides that, this new info about, the budgets and you having to use your own money, like it's enlightening. It doesn't make it any better, to be honest, right? Like it's still a crummy deal. I hate it. I just talked about this. I replayed 1 and 2 as we were getting closer to the Veilguard, and I made videos on my retrospective channel podcast, Now Back to the Past. Phenomenal games. 2 is really, really good, by the way, in case people forgot. But 1 runs like hot garbage on pretty much anything. PC, you either can get it running like with mods and like figuring it out, or it'll crash within the first 30 minutes. PS3, I actually played it on a PS3, like not emulated. I played it on a legitimate PS3, and it ran at like, oh my dear God, 10 to 15 frames per second. So the game is in a bad state, and it really is probably going to be a game that's just left behind, like this era that's just deserted, which is really sad. That's why it's sad. That's why kind of no matter, like here's the thing, I can understand the business. I can understand why it's not happening. I can still hate it. I can still say this is going to be a game that I think is not lost to time in the sense that we'll all forget about it, but like in the state that the game is, right, to actually play it, it is getting more and more lost as time goes on. Like, I think that's just a factual thing, and that sucks. Like, again, I get it. I get that it's hard. I get that, again, like, you'd have to hire and basically make a small team to be able to do it, and you just cannot do it. EA will not give them extra money, and they can't use the natural money to do something like that. I understand it, but I just feel, it's a tough thing, especially when you kind of get your hopes up, or they got our hopes up, because of Mass Effect, right? Like doing Legendary Edition was like, yeah, just do it for, it was so easy. It was so easy to say, just do it for Dragon Age as well. And Dragon Age Veilguard was closer when like Legendary Edition came out than Mass Effect, whatever number we're on now, is to that Legendary. You know what I mean? So like, Dragon Age was closer. It actually would have made sense to do the Dragon Age Remaster collection at the time they did Mass Effect, and do Mass Effect like right about now, like literally in the next year or two, to drop them. So, I mean, that's, it kind of gets us hoping and wishing that they just did it for Dragon Age, not necessarily in place of Mass Effect, although maybe you would take that now, but you would kind of want both of them, and that's just not going to happen. So it does suck. I don't think EA will ever change their mind, to be honest, based off of what, we heard here. But just wanted to go over my thoughts. You guys let me know what you think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.